For your entire life, you have been sold a very specific version of the American dream. It is a narrative that has been drilled into your head by your parents, your grandparents, societal expectations, and, most aggressively, by the real estate and banking industries. The narrative goes exactly like this: go to school, get a good job, save up for a down payment, and buy a house as soon as humanly possible. Because, as the saying goes, renting is just throwing money away, and buying real estate is the ultimate, guaranteed path to building wealth. For a long time, for previous generations, that narrative was mostly true. If you bought a house in 1980, or 1995, or even 2012, you likely rode a massive wave of demographic expansion, dropping interest rates, and localized economic booms. You looked like a financial genius simply by existing and holding a deed. But we are not in 1995 anymore. It is the year 2026. The macroeconomic landscape has fundamentally, violently shifted. The rules of the game have been rewritten, but the old advice is still being parroted by people who do not understand the math of the modern economy. I am going to make a statement that will likely make many people uncomfortable, especially real estate agents and mortgage brokers. But it needs to be said, and it needs to be proven. For the vast majority of people watching this video, buying a house in 2026 is a terrible financial mistake. In fact, it might be the single most destructive financial decision you can make for your long-term wealth. Today, we are going to strip away the emotion, the nostalgia, and the societal pressure of homeownership. We are going to look purely at the cold, hard mathematics of the 2026 housing market. We are going to expose the hidden costs that the banks deliberately obscure. We are going to completely debunk the renting is throwing money away myth. And we are going to look at the massive demographic cliff that threatens to stagnate housing prices for the next decade. If you are currently saving for a down payment, or if you are feeling depressed because you feel priced out of the housing market, this video is going to change your entire perspective. You might just realize that being priced out is the greatest financial blessing in disguise you could have ever asked for. Let us begin by dissecting the most toxic myth in personal finance: renting is throwing your money away. When you rent an apartment, people tell you that you are paying your landlord's mortgage. You are getting zero equity. At the end of the year, you have nothing to show for it. Therefore, buying a house is inherently superior because every time you pay your mortgage, you are paying yourself, right? This is a fundamental misunderstanding of how mortgages, interest, and unrecoverable costs actually work. To understand this, we have to introduce a concept called unrecoverable costs. An unrecoverable cost is money that leaves your bank account and never comes back. It does not build equity. It does not grow in value. It is simply the price you pay to consume a service. When you rent, your entire rent payment is an unrecoverable cost. You pay $2,500 a month for the service of putting a roof over your head. It is clean, it is simple, and it is 100% unrecoverable. Now, let us look at buying a house. People mistakenly believe that a mortgage payment is just a forced savings account. But in the first decade of a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, the vast majority of your payment is completely unrecoverable. Let's look at the math for 2026. Let's assume you buy a modest $500,000 home. You put 20% down, which is $100,000. You take out a $400,000 mortgage. In the current economic environment, let's say you secure an interest rate of around 6.5%. Your principal and interest payment is going to be roughly $2,500 a month. But here is the dirty secret of loan amortization that banks don't want you to focus on. In the first year of that mortgage, out of that $2,500 a month, almost $2,100 is going straight to the bank as interest. Only $400 is actually paying down your principal balance. That $2,100 a month in interest is an unrecoverable cost. It is gone forever. You are not paying yourself, you are paying the bank's shareholders. You are essentially renting the money from the bank, and the cost of renting that money is astronomically high. But interest is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the unrecoverable costs of homeownership. Next, we have property taxes. Property taxes are essentially rent you pay to the government to keep the house you own. Depending on where you live, property taxes can easily range from 1% to 3% of the home's value every single year. On a $500,000 home, at a 1.5% tax rate, that is $7,500 a year, or $625 a month. That money is unrecoverable. It does not build equity. Furthermore, as property values inflate, the government reassesses your home, and your taxes go up. It is a completely variable, unpredictable unrecoverable cost. Then we have homeowners insurance. If you have been paying attention to the insurance markets over the last few years leading into 2026, you know we are in a historic crisis. Due to increased natural disasters, inflation in building materials, and corporate greed, major insurance carriers have been pulling out of entire states or raising premiums by 30%, 50%, or even 100% year over year. Let's conservatively estimate your insurance is $200 a month. That is unrecoverable. Finally, we have maintenance. When you rent, if the water heater explodes, if the roof leaks, or if the HVAC system dies in the middle of summer, you pick up your phone, call the landlord, and go back to sleep. It is their financial nightmare, not yours. When you own the house, you are the landlord. The standard rule of thumb for home maintenance is that you should expect to spend 1% to 2% of the home's purchase price every year on upkeep, repairs, and capital expenditures. On a $500,000 house, that is $5,000 to $10,000 a year. That is roughly $400 to $800 a month. You might not spend it every month, but eventually, you will need a new $15,000 roof, or a new $8,000 air conditioning unit. That money is unrecoverable. It does not increase the value of your home, it merely prevents the value from depreciating. So, let us add up the true unrecoverable costs of owning this $500,000 home in the first year. Interest, $2,100 a month. Property taxes, $625 a month. Insurance, $200 a month. Maintenance, conservative estimate $500 a month. Your total unrecoverable cost of owning that home is $3,425 every single month. Let me repeat that. You are throwing away $3,425 a month to the bank, the government, the insurance company, and the Home Depot, just for the privilege of saying you own a home. If you can rent an equivalent home in your area for $2,800 a month, renting is actually the mathematically superior wealth-building decision. You are throwing away less money by renting than you are by owning. This brings us to a critical financial maxim: rent is a ceiling, but a mortgage is a floor. When you sign a lease for $2,800 a month, that is the maximum amount you will pay for housing that year. It is a fixed, predictable cost. You can budget around it perfectly. When you sign a mortgage, your payment of principal and interest is the absolute minimum you will pay. It is the floor. When property taxes hike, when insurance premiums skyrocket, when the foundation cracks, your monthly housing cost explodes upward. Homeownership introduces a massive amount of variable liability into your financial life. But what about the equity? What about the down payment? This brings us to the second major reason why buying a house in 2026 is a massive trap: the opportunity cost of capital. When you buy that $500,000 house, you have to put down $100,000 in cash. That is $100,000 of your hard-earned, after-tax money that you have aggressively saved. The moment you use that money as a down payment, you trap it inside drywall and concrete. That equity is dead. It is illiquid. It does not pay you a dividend. It does not generate cash flow. The only way you can access that wealth is by taking on more debt through a home equity line of credit, or by selling the house, paying 6% to real estate agents, and moving. Capital is supposed to have a velocity. It is supposed to work for you. Let us compare the homebuyer to a disciplined renter. Let us say you choose to rent that $2,800 a month house. Because your total housing costs are cheaper than the homeowner, who is paying $2,500 mortgage plus $625 taxes plus $200 insurance plus $500 maintenance equals $3,825 total out of pocket, you have an extra $1,025 a month in your budget. More importantly, you still have your $100,000 down payment sitting in your bank account. If you take that $100,000, and you invest it into a broad market S&P 500 index fund, and you take the $1,025 you save every month by renting, and you invest that into the market as well. Historically, the stock market returns an average of about 8% to 10% per year over long periods. Let's use a conservative 8%. Over the next 10 years, your $100,000 principal, plus your monthly investments, compounding at 8%, will grow to approximately $400,000. That is liquid, easily accessible, wealth-generating capital. What happens to the homeowner's house? Real estate, historically, appreciates at roughly the rate of inflation, historically around 3% to 4% a year on average. Yes, there are boom towns, but there are also dying towns. On average nationwide, it tracks inflation. If their $500,000 house appreciates at 4% a year, in 10 years, it will be worth about $740,000. They bought it for $500,000, now it's $740,000. They made $240,000 in equity, right? Wrong. You have to subtract the costs. To sell that $740,000 house, they will pay roughly 6% in agent commissions and closing costs. That is $44,000 gone. Furthermore, over those 10 years, they paid over $200,000 in unrecoverable interest to the bank. They paid $75,000 in property taxes. They paid $60,000 in maintenance. When you accurately calculate the true cost of ownership, the homeowner's net return on their $100,000 initial investment is drastically lower than the renter who systematically invested their capital into the stock market. The renter is liquid. The renter is globally diversified across the 500 largest companies on Earth. The homeowner has their entire net worth tied up in a single illiquid asset, in a single neighborhood, completely exposed to the local job market, local property tax policies, and hyperlocal environmental risks. From a purely risk-adjusted return perspective, trapping massive amounts of capital in a primary residence in 2026 is a suboptimal allocation of resources. Now, we need to talk about the macroeconomics of 2026. Because even if you ignore the math of unrecoverable costs and opportunity cost, you have to look at the structural forces acting on the housing market right now. Many people are buying houses out of FOMO, fear of missing out. They look at what happened between 2020 and 2023, where housing prices skyrocketed 30% or 40% in just a few years, and they think, if I don't buy now, I will never be able to afford a home. The prices will just keep going up to the moon. This is recency bias. It is the belief that whatever happened recently will continue to happen forever. But the conditions that created that historic boom are dead and gone. That boom was fueled by 0% interest rates, massive government stimulus, and a sudden, once-in-a-century shift to remote work that caused millions of people to simultaneously migrate to the suburbs. It was an anomaly. In 2026, we are facing the exact opposite conditions. First, we have the affordability crisis. Housing prices are ultimately tethered to local incomes. A house is only worth what the local labor force can afford to pay for it on a monthly basis. Right now, the gap between the median home price and the median income is at its highest level in modern history. When interest rates were 3%, a buyer could afford a massive loan because the monthly payment was low. With rates hovering significantly higher, that purchasing power is gone. Millions of potential buyers have simply been mathematically eliminated from the market. They cannot get approved for the loans required to buy homes at these inflated prices. When demand is destroyed by unaffordability, prices cannot continue to rise at historical rates. They must either stagnate for a decade while wages slowly catch up, or they must undergo a painful correction. Buying into a market at peak prices, with peak interest rates, while wages remain relatively stagnant, is the definition of catching a falling knife. Second, we have to look at the massive demographic shift occurring right now, the silver tsunami. The baby boomer generation, one of the largest demographic cohorts in history, holds an unprecedented amount of real estate. As we move deeper into the late 2020s, this generation is aging. Over the next 10 to 15 years, tens of millions of boomers will be downsizing, moving into assisted living, or passing away. This means that a massive, historical wave of housing supply is inevitably going to hit the market. At the exact same time, the generations behind them, Millennials and Gen Z, are burdened with student loan debt, facing a volatile job market heavily impacted by AI, and fundamentally lack the purchasing power to absorb all of this incoming inventory at current peak prices. Basic economics dictates that when supply drastically increases, and demand is restricted by affordability, prices must face downward pressure. Expecting your house to double in value over the next 10 years like it did in the previous 10 years is a delusion entirely detached from demographic reality. Finally, let us talk about the ultimate hidden cost of homeownership in the modern era, the loss of mobility. We are living in an economy that is changing faster than at any point in human history. Artificial intelligence is disrupting entire industries. Companies are restructuring. The days of working for the same corporation in the same city for 30 years and retiring with a gold watch are completely over. To maximize your income in 2026 and beyond, you have to be agile. You have to be willing to move where the capital is flowing. If a massive opportunity opens up across the country, or if your local industry collapses, your ability to pack up and leave is your greatest financial superpower. When you buy a house, you are planting a 30-year anchor into the ground. You are financially marrying your local zip code. If you lose your job, or if a better opportunity arises elsewhere, you cannot just leave. You have to prepare the house for sale, put it on the market, hope you find a buyer, pay 6% to your real estate agent, pay closing costs, and pray you don't take a loss. This friction is so painful and expensive that most people simply choose to stay put, accept a lower salary, or pass up on life-changing opportunities. Renting is not throwing money away. Renting is purchasing flexibility. Renting is buying the option to optimize your life and your career at a moment's notice. In a volatile, rapidly shifting global economy, mobility is a high-value asset, and homeownership destroys it. Now, I want to be perfectly clear. I am not saying you should never, under any circumstances, buy a house. Real estate is not inherently evil. But it is vital that you correctly categorize what a primary residence actually is. Your primary residence is not an investment. It is a luxury consumption item. It is a lifestyle choice. If you are married, if you have 3 children, if you have a rock-solid, recession-proof career in a specific city, if you plan on living in the exact same location for a minimum of 10 to 15 years, and if you truly, deeply desire the emotional stability of painting your own walls and planting your own garden, then by all means, buy a house. But do it with your eyes wide open. Do not lie to yourself and call it a financial masterstroke. Understand that you are choosing a specific lifestyle, and you are paying a massive premium for that lifestyle. Ensure that your mortgage, taxes, and insurance do not exceed 25% to 30% of your take-home pay. Do not become house poor, where all of your wealth is trapped in the walls while you stress about how to afford groceries. Make sure you are still fully funding your retirement accounts and investing in liquid assets outside of your real estate. But if you are in your 20s or 30s, if you are single or newly partnered, if you are still climbing the career ladder, or if you simply live in a high cost of living area where the math of renting is vastly superior to owning, do not let society shame you into making a horrific financial mistake. The pressure you feel to buy a house is artificial. It is marketing. Do not let your parents, who bought a house for 3 raspberries and a firm handshake in 1985, dictate your financial strategy in 2026. They are playing a game that no longer exists. Protect your capital. Maintain your mobility. Invest heavily in liquid, productive assets like the stock market. Learn high-income skills. Renting and reinvesting the difference is not a failure. In the macroeconomic environment of 2026, it is the most sophisticated, mathematically sound wealth-building strategy available to you. Do the math. Ignore the noise. And take control of your financial destiny.